Today, I would like to welcome a great guest to the podcast. Her name is Cassie Ferraiuolo, and she reached out to me after hearing about the podcast and shared her amazing thesis with me. And after reading that, I was like, I think she needs to come on and be a guest because we've got some things in common. So, welcome to the podcast, Cassie.
Thank you very much. And I agree. I think we have the perfect combination of what, like we talked about earlier, your goal and my content. I think it's a perfect match.
Absolutely. And then I'm not sure if I butchered your last name or not, but I don't know if you want to, if that was correct.
Yes. So you didn't, because that's how we would say it the Americanized way, Ferriolo. But for all of my Italian friends that would make fun of me for saying it that way, it's actually pronounced Ferriolo. But we're just going to continue with the Ferriolo Americanized way.
Perfect. Well, our listeners are meeting you for the first time. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? We'll talk about your thesis.
Okay, so I'm Cassie Ferraiuolo, and I have a bachelor's and master's degree in history, and I'm on my eighth year teaching US history. I'm from Colusa, and I'm really proud of it. Colusa is a small town. There's maybe only 6,000 people, but I just feel like Colusa is full of history that people don't even realize is right there. And there's a lot of reasons for writing my thesis, but part of it is that I want to show people in Colusa that we have stories here. It's not just a boring, dusty old town. It's important.
Absolutely. And that's in California, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so Colusa was a little Italy in a sense. Am I correct about that?
Yeah. So something surprising actually is late 1800s, early 1900s, the Catholic Church service was in Italian, Spanish, French, German, Portuguese, English, and maybe some others.
Oh
So
my gosh.
there was a lot of like little Portugal and little Germany, but little Italy's story wasn't yet written. And that's why I wanted to do that.
So just for reference, where is it? Is it close to like Los Angeles, San Francisco?
We're 2 hours away from San Francisco.
Okay.
So it's like we're an hour northwest of Sacramento.
All right. So you wrote a thesis called Little Italy, Colusa, the Forgotten Neighborhood. Do you want to go ahead and tell us what that was about?
Yes. So I would say, in a nutshell, my thesis is a collection of five stories that are about a nearly forgotten neighborhood in Colusa called Little Italy. Each of the chapters is written to be standalone, so a reader could jump to either chapter, whatever they're interested in, and they don't necessarily have to go in order. I only cover about 1850 to 1930 because I didn't want to well, I had a limit, like I had a goal to graduate, and that took me so long as it is. But I didn't want to get into World War II. A lot of people ask me, like, why aren't you talking about World War II? But that's a whole other book.
Absolutely.
So I'd kind of stopped there and I focused on the family mysteries that I wanted to
Yeah. Oh man.
proof or deprove or whatever.
Right. I loved the beginning part when you are talking with your father and just about Italians and in that area. And he was like, it's here. Little Italy is here. I mean, it was just, that was such a touching moment. Because it's true, as your kid, you don't, I've talked about that before. Like, I always knew we were Italian, but I think as you get older, you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. So.
Yeah. Our perspective changes. Like instead of, yeah, we're able to look outside and see and look in, right?
Exactly, absolutely. So, with your thesis, was there anything that surprised you while you were digging into that Italian American history?
So when I set out to tell the story, I didn't really think that my family was going to play such a paramount role because I didn't want it to become like, I mean, it's fine with me that it became a family story in a way, but I didn't intend that to be. But once I started the research, I realized that my family was constantly being written about, almost like tabloid. So that was surprising. And I hope people realize I did my very best to keep everything like as, you know, make sure I didn't say anything without proof. And if I don't know something, I would definitely say I don't know. But I am hoping in the future I could write in a way that I can incorporate like the other things I know that maybe necessarily I don't have written documentation for. because there's a lot that I couldn't put in here because I need to be as, historically accurate as I could possibly be.
Especially with your thesis paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I do that on the podcast too. I'm like, I'm not sure. I can't prove this, but here's something that I heard. And those are always the juiciest details that you want to add in. And you're like, oh, I can't prove that.
And one of the things I want to add is my dad especially would tell me these stories, and he'd tell this incredible story and then say, "It's probably not true." I'd be like, "I am gonna find out." I can do that. And surprisingly, so far everything has been true.
That's amazing. It was
Yeah.
like he had to have his disclaimer too, like, well, maybe not.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Exactly.
So, when you were sitting down trying to think about your thesis, what brought you to that moment where you're like, why don't I write about Colusa?
So I've always been very interested in history as long as I can remember. And I have such strong familial bonds and like interest, maybe kind of an odd child in that way, because I always loved to hear stories and I'd ask my grandpa to tell me stories. And my dad, he would walk me around town and tell me stories about like so and so lived here and this happened over here. And he really connected, for me, Colusa was like history. It was history. But I knew it wasn't going to get the credit. And all these stories that were just going to fade away and die if I didn't do anything about it. So I really wanted to make my thesis about that. I also believe that writing, I know sometimes we have to write for work or for school, but I think it's important that we have passion about it. And I couldn't imagine choosing anything that I didn't really care about. And actually, it took me about a year to convince my college to let me write this thesis to pick this topic. Because,
Wow.
yeah, I didn't give up. They didn't really believe that there's a story. I don't know what I would have done if I couldn't have chosen this.
Well, it probably wouldn't have felt authentic for you.
Yeah.
And well, good for you for not giving up because talk about stories, holy smokes. And I feel you. I want to talk about those forgotten Italians, Americans. Those stories, if we don't keep them alive, will disappear.
Every guest that you have on here is contributing to that preservation. Like the small town person, the regular, ordinary person that everybody forgets about, they're actually represent the majority of Americans. So.
Absolutely. So you mentioned your great grandfather quite a bit in your thesis. What role did, well, I mean, I think we've talked about like the family story shaping your research, but what about your great grandfather?
So before I get into that question, I actually recently noticed a typo in the introduction of my thesis, and it's been driving me crazy. If anybody's listening, I want to just tell them I called my great great grandpa my third great grandpa. He's my second great grandpa. I don't know why that bothers me so much, but it does. So
You're adding a generation there. That's
yeah, it's like one further generation away from Italy. So I call the Frank Ferraiuolo my second great grandpa the OG Frank or the original Frank because there's, as you know, and as I've heard like some of your other guests say, Italians like to name people the same exact thing. So there's a lot of Franks in the family, and he's the original one. He's like the one everyone's named after.
nice.
He's the, if I say like the OG Frank or the original Frank, that's who I'm talking about.
Yeah. And so was he the one who came over from Italy or
Mhm.
okay. What part of Italy?
Calabria? Where's your family from?
Basilicata region.
Okay.
I think above you just a little
Uh-huh.
bit. And then they did a quick stop in New York and came to Colorado for the mining.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basilicata has a lot of mountain ranges, and it's
It,
interesting how they migrated to places that were similar
yeah,
to their home.
they found like where they knew how to work.
Exactly. They knew the climate and environment, and it wouldn't be a shock for them as
Mhm.
much of a shock anyways.
Yeah,
So,
it's definitely very hard work.
so speaking of that, how did Italians first start making their way to Colusa?
So I have some notes here just in case audience is wondering what I'm looking at, because it can be kind of complicated.
Sure.
So there's a few ways Italians started making their way to Colusa. But if we start way back in the beginning, I would say I'm of the informed opinion that Italians first started arriving in Colusa around the 1860s. So, as we know, that's during the Civil War in America. but also in Italy, the unification of Italy was also occurring at the same time. So I think Italians were trying to escape these bad situations at home. They wanted a better life. So these very first settlers had to take a ship all the way around the southernmost tip of South America called Cape Horn. And the passage is called Drake's Passage. It's where the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean meet, and it's very dangerous for ships. And there's a lot of shipwrecks there.
Oh, wow.
So it would take a long time for one. It would cost a bunch of money. It was very dangerous. And I'm sure it was mentally taxing.
Oh.
We can think about how a lot of our ancestors came with just the clothes on their back and they're leaving their family behind and they're just like kind of going into the dark. So, and that's a long time to think about if did I make the right decision?
Yes. And there's no turning back at that point.
Yeah. And then they would, at least the ones going to Colusa would dock in San Francisco. And at that time, well, okay, so I should probably mention how in Italy, I'd say even today, but more so back in the day, the northern and southern Italians did not really get along with each other. They're like very regionally divided. There's not a loyalty to Italy. It's like I'm loyal to the south, I'm loyal to the north. And so in San Francisco, the northern Italians had already arrived and they were dominating the area. So any trade an Italian might want to pick up, they weren't going to get it. I think they had to look elsewhere, and for some reason, Colusa was a good handful of them went. They went to Colusa. What makes Colusa special, which I'm just going to say this as a side note because I want to talk about the chain migration too. But in Colusa, we have Italians from all the regions, northern, central, and southern together. And like leaders in the community were from all three regions, which I think is really special and unique. And I think like something Colusa should be proud of that
Yeah.
we got over that.
Especially that they were the leaders. I'm sure there were some arguments there, but they kept it together. So that's really good. So I might be diving into your next question, but was there an industry or something that brought them to Colusa?
I want to say it's agriculture. The climate in California is the same, like very similar to Italy. So whatever they can grow in Italy, we grow here, olives and grapes and everything.
Yep, that makes sense. Denver is kind of the big hub of Colorado, where the Italians went to. Pueblo too, but I live very west, almost to the Utah border in Grand Junction, Colorado. We had a lot of Italians here, and it was kind of the same thing, agricultural.
Okay.
Like even now we have peach orchards, we have wineries here. We do get colder probably than you guys do in the winter, but
Yeah, for sure.
I was reading some of the diaries of Italians that came here and they were talking about how the landscape looked the same, but it was just expanded out. So they were like, we have breathing
Wow.
room. We can spread out a little. Well, so you mentioned chain migration. Do you want to go ahead and talk about that a little bit?
So the first wave I'd say came in like the mid to late 1800s, and then the second wave going to the East Coast would be like around early 1900s, 19 teens, and they would most likely dock at New Jersey or New York.
Mhm.
And there we'd see like labor recruiting agents that would be waiting there. And I wouldn't say they were nice people at all because they knew that all these immigrants were coming here just desperate for a better life and they want a job and they hear America is the land of plenty and opportunity and the American dream. And so they're basically people holding up signs like advertising this great opportunity. And so these guys, they would call them man catchers sometimes, would get paid per person they brought back. So a lot of them saw Minnesota and they're like, let's go to Minnesota. That seems like a good plan. And of course it wasn't that way when they arrived. It was very, very horrible. But during this time, so there's like a bunch of what will become Colusa Italians are in Minnesota. We have my second great grandpa, the original Frank, is in Colusa. And what I think is interesting is they're still communicating with each other. I don't understand that because how are they able to like get everybody's addresses and send letters when they don't even know where they're going to be?
Through my research, I've ran across things in newspapers where it's like the post office would put out a notice and say, these people have letters You have 3 weeks
Oh,
to pick them up, and then we're tossing them. So maybe it was like, hey, we'll be in Denver or Colusa or whatever. Just send a letter to that post office. Maybe that was it. I don't know.
that's probably it. And they would
Yeah.
get their actual address and then these people in Minnesota are staying, I imagine like also in Colorado, they're staying in camps, that their boss just like popped up real quick. It's pretty amazing. I mean, thinking also about today, we have all this technology and some people don't talk or see each other for years
Yeah.
sometimes. And here they are changing their entire lives and they're still able to keep in touch. Just
Yeah. Writing
doing
by
what,
candlelight, probably
yeah,
after a long day's work.
right. And their hands are just covered in like dirt and grime from working and
They're
yeah.
in Minnesota, probably ice. Just kidding. They're
It's
frozen
cold.
up there.
Oh, it's so cold. So the original Frank is communicating with his old neighbors that are now in Minnesota. And I imagine that he is telling them good things about Colusa. Like, it's great here. We've got all this agriculture. It's wonderful. It's different than Minnesota, like way different than mining.
Yeah.
But there's one guy in particular that is most notable for starting this chain migration, and that's January Cairo. He was also in Minnesota, and then he went to Colusa. So I imagine he was talking to the original Frank, then he checked it out, and then he wrote back to his friends in Minnesota. So here's a quote from a 1922 newspaper from January Cairo. It says, January Cairo is turning out to be a regular colonizer. He announced today that 50 or more new settlers will arrive in Colusa within a short time. His friends have heard of his success. Now they are coming. All are Italian. There's at least three articles where the newspaper's talking about the Italian colony is going to arrive. Everyone also in this story would say, oh, I think the Cairos had a lot to do with this chain migration, but nobody could prove it. Not that I didn't believe them, but here
Yeah.
plenty of proof. I also had, so we had the Ferraiuolo, original Frank Ferraiuolo was here, but then I had other Ferraiuolos in Minnesota too. So they're reuniting with their family after like 10 years or more. I wrote down some numbers here about the amount of Italians in Colusa around this time. So this first number is looking only at the census reports. I know not everybody showed up on the census that was there. There was about 10 to 13% of the town was Italian around 1920, and 33% of students at the Catholic school were Italian, which is a
Wow.
lot.
Yeah, that's the population that's going to grow up.
Mhm. And they had a lot of kids. I guess that makes sense, right? That
Yeah.
the adult number would be lower because they have 7 to 9 kids like on a regular basis. So that's pretty much the chain migration story.
So farming brought them there. Was there any industries that they were able to expand or create in Colusa?
Yes. So when Italians first started showing up in Colusa, I feel like agriculture was like just starting and the Italians came over and I want to say there this is not to say that others didn't contribute,
Yeah.
but the Italian role has been hidden or not told, and they deserve like a moment, I think, because they came over with their expertise and like hard work, and they grew these industries. They're bringing home awards and they're winning state championships and all kinds of things, like from olives, tomatoes, potatoes, peaches, apples, almonds, just like anything you could possibly imagine. They're growing and they're expanding and they're putting Colusa on the map by winning these big expos. And there's a guy named Will S. Green who we'll talk about later on. He's like a California pioneer. He's pretty famous here. Like his house is in Colusa and it's a historic landmark. He was also involved in agriculture in the community. And so some of the Italians would send him like, oh, here, check out this new type of grass. And he would look at it and he'd be like, this is great. This is going to change the community. And he would be like, okay. And then they would be able to go and expand there.
So they won a lot of awards for their
Yes.
farming. Did they raise animals too, or was it just mainly crops?
I don't have that much information about animals like on a big scale, but I do know at home they did. A lot of them had horses and cows, and like the original Frank, he had a barn. So the property now is really small compared to what it used to be, and he had a barn with cows and horses and probably everything you can need because Southern Italians are subsistence farmers by like nature. I mean, in southern Italy, they grew everything they needed themselves. And so
Yeah.
my original Frank, and I'm sure other Italians were the same way, you know?
Yeah. Kind of out of necessity, like they were forced to.
Then they would also, so the extra they could sell, but I know a lot of them gave it away to like their family and
Mm.
shared with the community. So I know especially like during the Depression that the Ferraiuolo family was giving a lot of stuff to a lot of people, a lot of vegetables.
So what were some of the hardships, struggles that they encountered?
I think, unfortunately, I feel like American history has a lot of discrimination and especially picking on the newcomer. So when Italians were the newcomer, it was no different than any other newcomer that was going to face like all these stereotypes. And I think the beginning struggles were just about proving their value because they had to fight against all these stereotypes. So these stories of discrimination, and we talked about Will S. Green earlier. He's like a hero to California, but he was not very open-minded. And
Mm.
I have a quote from him that I'd like to share. This is what he said in 1891. This is when the most Italians were showing up. He says, "The Italians who come here come after our money, come here to grow rich by fair or foul. They produce nothing we need, and we would not miss their trade if Mount Vesuvius should engulf the whole territory."
Jeez.
Yeah.
What a statement to unpack. I mean, especially considering what you just talked about, how they came and they grew all of these crops, they won awards.
And he's also a leader and he's influential. So what he says matters. He's not just some regular person saying a comment. People will listen to him. Drain thinks these people are bad and they're coming to our country. Then I have another example. This is from a newspaper in 1915. It's not him. The author wasn't published, but they're talking about how Italians would hang garlic out to dry, like outside their houses or shops or whatever. And basically, he says that I'm paraphrasing this one because I didn't get the whole quote written down, but he's saying that the Italians ought to be hung as well. Like they should be strung up just like the
Interesting.
garlic. This was supposed to be like a joke column, but it's like saying they should be dead too, you know?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're basically wishing that they didn't exist there.
Hmm.
Wow. And this
Yeah.
was in a Colusa newspaper.
Yep. And there's a lot of other things. Like I'd say very often Italians were slighted or getting little jabs about their accent or their work ethic or their appearance or how they smelled or something like that. I couldn't find this article, but there was one with the original Frank before he becomes like this town celebrity. And he's complaining because cars had just come out and they're like, he has horses and he wants to ride horses, but he gets a car from the city and they're like, he's trying to start it and it just takes like 30 minutes to start the car if it starts at all. And they're like they print what he wrote, but they put his accent in there and it's definitely like making fun of him, like making him seem uneducated, like he can't start the car because he's an Italian and it's just like really mean.
Yeah.
It's so unnecessarily mean.
I ran across that as well. One of the words that I remember, it was like they were trying to say business, but they put it as business and they actually
Yeah.
spelled it Beez because they were quoting an Italian. And, it's just,
They know they know what they're trying to say. Just write the word, like just write what
exactly.
they're saying. Thankfully, we're
Yeah.
nicer now, or maybe at least we're more aware of like how to treat people better a little bit.
Yeah. They were kind of ruthless back then. They'd put
Yeah.
almost
Everyone was
anything
really,
in the paper.
uh-huh. Oh yeah.
So, how did Italians hold on to their culture in Colusa after coming to America and settling there?
So I think Italians are, of course, they're hardworking, community oriented, and family is very important to them. And I think that these characteristics allowed them over time, as people kept seeing them be these things, they realized, oh, they actually are American. Like this is what it means to be American, is working hard, being part of the community, and taking care of your family. So I think that's the main thing is they just did not give up and they kept doing those things. I know, of course, though, as other people in your podcast have talked about, some Italian families would stop speaking Italian or they wouldn't let their children speak Italian, and they really did try to give up they really did give it up, which is terrible. But at least in Colusa for a long time, I'd say until like the 1980s, I think Italian culture it was pretty strong. And I think it goes back to like the culture is preserved because the Italians could go out into the community and be American. They could do these American things, but then at the end of the day, they came back to their neighborhoods and back to their community and back home, and they were always together and they were their bonds were like so strong. And I think that's what allowed them to keep their culture.
Yeah.
I think now it's different because so like the elder people have passed away. So those people who like were the foundation that brought everybody together, those people are gone. And it's particularly in Colusa, probably other towns too, but in Colusa, there's not much opportunity for all the agricultural jobs. Like people already have those. There's already powerhouses there. So if you're going to work on the farm, that's cool. You could still work on the farm. But then if you want more, it's not really in Colusa, you
So
know.
people move.
Yeah, they leave, unfortunately.
I agree with you. I think the 80s, it really started dying out. I feel in a way there's a resurgence, but I feel like it's online a little
Yeah,
bit. And I know that's like through social media, I know that it's
hopefully.
still alive in homes and people still have their own traditions, but there's so much sharing online about the Italian American culture, but behind the screen, I don't know.
Right. I think maybe it will come back. I don't know. Maybe trends they'll bring everybody back. And especially with like podcasts like yours, hopefully people will realize like our history matters, our culture matters. We should know where we came from, and maybe they'll be inspired to look into their past and learn what it means to be Italian or whatever.
And you know what I love too is kind of going back to what you were saying about the hardworking and the family. The more I research, like Colorado Italians are very different than, not entirely, but than back east Italians. And I'm sure
Yeah.
California, you guys are different than us. Maybe we have a little bit more similarities. We had a lot of ranching and farming and stuff. But those are those common threads that you find wherever is the family, the hardworking, especially.
I think also, of course, yeah, I love all Italians, no matter where they're from, but the media shares mostly East Coast Italians. So we're so different, like Colorado and California, than the East Coast. So when they're like, "Oh, you're Italian," well, Italians in New Jersey don't talk like you, or
Or,
they have their own like slang words and stuff. So
yeah.
I appreciate like getting to be here and tell this story, like the California Italian story. It's a little different.
Absolutely. And going back to the slang words, I've had people ask me, "Oh, have you ever heard of this?" And I'm like, "I don't know what that is." Like we don't have that here in the West part. I mean,
Yeah,
I know of it, but did I grow up saying that? No.
right.
So tell us about, there was a part with the prohibition and the winemaking. You want to talk about that a little bit?
I have only one picture of the original Frank, and I'll describe it for people. So it's this picture of him. It's the only picture I have, and he's standing in front of a vineyard, and then his friend has a bottle of wine, like a big bottle of wine. And I think it's so powerful because it's during Prohibition. Let me take my picture. It's like saying, try me. Like, look. So I thought I'm going to read part of an article from 1922. This is during Prohibition, and I'm going to summarize some of it because it was a really long article in the newspaper. So I'm shortening it up. I also want to mention that at these parties would be like public officials from Colusa County, like the most important people in the county, in neighboring regions, people from the Bay Area, important people from the Bay Area too. So they also list all these people in most of the articles, but I'm not going to read their names. I also want to say they say that the wine is non-alcoholic, but I'm just going to say I don't think that's true.
I'm gonna agree with you.
Yeah. And I have some other articles I'm going to read later that I think will help convince anybody that's doubtful. Mr. Ferraiuolo, since the advent of the 18th Amendment, has been famed as the maker of a splendid non-alcoholic wine. This has brought forth in quantity, as the guest of the home of Town Officer Ferraiuolo are always given the best. So the innocuous wine was brought forth, red wine, sparkling with the sunshine of sunny California, and white wine, aglow with California moonshine. These were sampled and pronounced excellent. At the proper time came the announcement that the birthday dinner was ready to be served, and the guests, all of them either officials of the town or county of Colusa, or prominent men otherwise, assembled in the dining room, where they sat down to an Italian feast which would have foundered Alderman Lucullus of Rome. There were soups and salads, raviolis, cavieras, fried chicken, casseroles, spaghetti, non-alcoholic, red wine, white wine ditto, pie, cake, ice cream, and all the dainties and tidbits that town officers love and crave. The birthday cake was a large round cake bearing its snow white summit 5 and 40 candles, because he was 45, each one representing a year lived by town officer Ferraiuolo. The guests did justice to the refreshments, both opaque and translucent, white and red, as well as the entire feast, which they pronounced the finest they had ever taken part of. Then came dancing. Music was furnished by Miss Ferraiuolo on the piano, where she played with rare execution and deep feeling. Telegrams were received from numerous public officers expressing their regret that businesses prevented them from joining in the festivities. Alderman Bacalupi of San Francisco wired that he was extremely sorry he could not attend, but that he will come next year. At the late hour and after a most enjoyable evening during which the responsibilities of the celebrants had demonstrated exuberant eccentricities and other perturbations, such as are always to be noted in society, the guests departed, wishing Town Officer Ferraiuolo many future birthdays and regretting only that he could not have them every week. So you can tell this is when he's like has become the man. If you can imagine, these parties occurred often, they're always publicized. They're not really shy about who's there. It's like who's who is there, like let's brag about it. So for Prohibition, I think Italians, so they're struggling to find their place in the new world. And then Prohibition comes along, which is the perfect opportunity because Italians, they're blessed with the heritage of gardening. They know how to make wine. And now all of a sudden it's illegal and people want it. I mean, where's the competition? Like, if you want to drink alcohol and there's an actual Italian person with real Italian wine, I think that's who I'm going to go to.
Exactly. And there's vineyards around. It can't get more
Yeah.
fresh off the vine than
Mhm.
that.
Exactly. It's like they're growing the grapes, they're making it. So Frank Ferraiuolo and John Del Papa, we haven't talked about him yet, but he's another, like, he's up there with Will S. Green as like prominent, like pioneers of Colusa. Del Papa is Italian and he's from the north. And so we have the south and the north. They together become the winemakers in the Prohibition era of Colusa. And it's kind of interesting because anytime an Italian is in jail and it's in the newspaper and you look down and see who furnished the bail, it's Ferraiuolo and Del Papa. So
Getting their
strange.
wine runners out of the
Yeah.
out of jail, probably.
And since they're so popular in the community, it's strange that to me they wouldn't care to hide. Like I would think I'm gonna give this guy money to bail those people out. I'm not gonna use my name and just.
Right?
And I also wondered why was this so public? And it's like they weren't afraid at all. And I heard, so actually I didn't, I know this is a fact, but I can't find the newspaper because I looked at it in passing and I didn't save it and I couldn't find it again. But there were another Italian family that was running the newspapers during this. And so I think they were using it as an advertisement. That's why I think it was like so blatant, just like in your face, we're drinking wine here. It's great.
Non-alcoholic.
Yeah, no, of course.
The language in that article is so great too. The sparkling and the moonshine, the
Oh,
moon
yeah.
and all that.
They definitely had to have someone help them because I know if the Janice family was running the newspapers, English was their second language, so they had to have help. I wrote some other quotes down, just short ones. So 1920, at the very start, this was like just as Prohibition started. In Colusa, the paper says, wine is said to be flowing quite freely somewhere in Colusa County, and it can be found in quantities sufficient to make drunk, come if one knows how. Then we have 1921. There must be some confusion. You can't legally make wine in either 200-gallon lots or half-ounce quantities. So May 15th, 1922, the town marshal Jack Donnefeld's birthday. It says Frank Ferraiuolo rolled up in his six-cylinder rough and ready and presented the marshal with a glorious chicken stew and 4 bottles of fine, but that would be telling too much. Jack is a year older today than he was Monday, but the memory of that stew and the 4 other items serves to submerge the poignancy of grief about getting older. Then there's 1923, Del Papa's ranch was raided. John Del Papa, that prominent member.
Oh, yeah.
They found large wine barrels were buried. Then 1923, Frank is caught with 325 gallons of wine in his basement.
Oh, geez, that's a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah, that's not for personal use for sure. And anyway, this continues to happen for quite a while. And again, with Del Papa and Ferraiuolo bailing out people. But then eventually it slows down, I think, because at least I don't know that the winemaking and selling was slowing down, but I think their public expression of it
Yeah.
stopped because they realized, oh gosh, there's people in neighboring towns that care about this and we're going to get in trouble.
Turn them in. Well, do you want to go ahead and move on to the mafia connection, the
Yeah.
100-year-old murder case?
So this mafia story. So the the head of my committee, when I was writing the thesis, his name is Dr. Nice at Chico State. He's an incredible, super smart person. He always believed in my story. And so he was never one of the people telling me, I can't tell this story. He always believed in it. And so he sees value in like all kinds of history, including small town, like regular people history. I think like these forgotten stories, that's something he believes in, which for the field of history is different,
Yeah.
you know. But one thing he cautioned me about was being sensationalist,
Mm.
and which I know is challenging with the mafia because everybody wants that's what they want to know about. However, I interviewed a lot of people, and sometimes, so I'd be interviewing them like normal questions, and then they would bring up the mafia, and I'm like, good, because I don't know how I was going to get to this question, because I don't want them to think this is all I care about. And then I tried to not act excited and be like, what, the mafia? What do you mean?
Keep
Like,
going, please.
yeah. And so a lot of people surprisingly would just stop talking. And I
Mm.
thought that was weird. And because I don't think we have to fear, I don't have a fear, but maybe these people do. I talked to one lady, she said that she was very like genuinely scared as a kid. So that could be why they're still remembering some things.
Sure, that generation kind of grew up with it a little bit more.
Mhm. So anybody that seemed afraid, I would make anonymous. And so there's some anonymous sources, and then some people would just stop talking. Or they'd be like, that's not, we're not talking about that. So this story, there's more than one, I'll say that. This is just the most famous one that kind of opened the doors to these other mafia stories that I still working on. So this was one of those stories that floats around the family and the community, and everybody knows about it, but nobody's quite sure like what's real, except for some of the older women who were alive during that time that were really little or they lost their brother was the guy that got murdered. But otherwise, it was kind of like this rumor floating around that we weren't really sure. And I was like really excited, like I'm gonna find this story. It took me such a long time. I looked at every single newspaper I could possibly look at. I found multiple newspaper articles, even ones written in Italian in San Francisco talking about it. Of course, through interviews, I got a recorded interview that my uncle took in, I think, 1983 of my great grandpa, who was a teenager during this time. It took me about a year to get the court case from the records office. There was like a transition of leadership, and so it was kind things were chaotic a little bit for a while, but I had to keep fighting for that too because a lot of people said, "Oh, that doesn't exist." You know.
Yeah, I've got a couple of those I'm working on too.
Oh man. Yeah. So it was a lot of work. It was like very stressful to get all this work. And I got the court case and I read everyone's testimony. There's some missing, weirdly. Um, but I took all the stories and I put it together to try to tell the best story, like the most accurate I could. So,
Gotcha.
and I'm also summarizing this. If anybody wants to read the whole thing, they can read chapter 6 in my thesis that's called Death on Babbo Natale's Doorstep. All right, on December 26th, 1926, the Ferraiuolo family held a party at their house, and this is known as the Ferraiuolo House in Colusa. It's on 1117 Market Street. It's still there, and it's on this night that a murder occurred. Pete Scordino killed an Angelo Fusaro. And I don't believe this is why he was killed, but it is said that Angelo owed Pete Scordino $20. but I don't think that's worth killing somebody. That's just what they said. I don't, so whatever. Okay. So at this party, Pete Scordino arrived to the Ferraiuolo house first. He has been friends with Frank Ferraiuolo for at least 10 years, which means they've known each other since the beginning of their time or more, like maybe back in the old world. Angelo Fusaro arrives later on, but he's very open about his presence. He doesn't hide himself at all, and he goes into the room in the house and he yells, "Merry Christmas!" out to everyone. And testimony says that Fusaro grabs Scordino by the collar and says, "I want to see you outside." So they go outside to the front porch and they're arguing. There's a lot that's blurred during this part. People's testimonies don't quite match. So Scordino reportedly pointed at Fusaro and said, "You better stay still." And I don't know if he pointed a gun or if he just pointed at him. And Fusaro, he yells, "Stay away." And he has this little knife, like a pin, like the size of a pin. He's like swinging the knife at him. "Stay away." And it cuts Pete on the hand. So then Pete Scordino goes into the house to get his hat and coat, which I think we know that his hat and coat really means I'm going to go get my gun, you know.
Yeah.
So this is a quote from the original Frank. So Pete Scordino goes in the house to get his hat and coat. And then my original Frank goes outside. He says, "I went outside myself, ran outside and saw Fusaro sitting, just got into the machine. Must have got into the machine when I got outside and went to him and told him, 'For God's sake, get away from here as quick as you can.'" And he didn't.
Oh no.
So Gordino comes back outside, and for some reason, Fusaro jumps out of his car when he sees him again. And at this point, Scordino has a 25 Colt revolver aimed at Fusaro. And this is from the coroner's report. It says Scordino shot him once in the chest. He was then shot two more times in the chest, once in each arm. Then he spun around and was shot two more times in the back.
Wow.
Yeah, so
That's a
complete.
lot.
That's like this guy's gonna die. Not
Yeah. There was no doubting that for him.
especially in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he said it was self-defense. But when they searched the body, all Fusaro had was candy in his pockets. He just had candy and an application to apply to become a citizen. And his sister, I'm not sure if she's alive anymore, but apparently she was like very traumatized by this event and she would cry even like years and years later. So that's the gist of the murder. But some of the ways I think it's related to the mafia. So there's a guy there named Joe Monaco, and once Scordino is done shooting, Joe Monaco pulls up. He pulls up in his car, and we don't know what happens. There's no documents about what happens then. However, we do know that Scordino was hiding in Joe Monaco's house. So I think he picked him up, took him. Like
Yeah.
a plan. It seems like I'm gonna shoot him. I'm gonna pull up, take you. I'm gonna hide you. I also talked to the family of Joe Monaco, and they told me that yes, they were from Sicily and they said in the mafia. So
Mm, there you go. Yeah.
then we have another source told me that I really wish I could find evidence of this besides just an interview, but another source told me that the judge was paid off and then he was driving around a new car like a couple weeks after the case ended.
Convenient.
Yes. Then I had another source told me that the mafia came to his house and was going to other people's houses and threatening them, "If you testify, we're going to hurt your family," that kind of thing. And then my great grandpa, he was like 17 or 19 during this. They also say he wasn't there. That's what's also weird, but he was. He
Oh,
witnessed it.
wow.
But he, when asked in the interview, it was on recording. Thankfully, my uncle cares about history and he recorded it. But I wish he asked more questions because he had that opportunity. But he told the story and he said, "Was it mafia?" And Pops, that what we call my great grandpa, he's like, "Oh yeah." And it was Pete Scordino. And he told a couple of other stories about how one time this guy showed up at his house. By this time he was Pops Louis Ferraiuolo was grown up. My grandpa was a kid, and this guy showed up and he's like, "Hey, can you please keep me for a night? They're gonna kill me." And he says, "I really don't want any trouble here, but okay, you can stay one night." And then the next day he had to leave and he ends up getting killed. And Louis Ferraiuolo says it was Pete Scordino that did it. And then there's another story where a man he was like, they were going to kill him and got ran out of town and he ended up starving to death because he was too afraid to come back. in the
Oh,
town.
you're that scared that you starved to death.
Yeah.
Holy smokes. Oh my gosh.
And then I think about the connections to San Francisco, and there's all kinds of things. Like there's a guy, this like mafia leader guy with the last name Ferry, Ferri.
Mm,
Like, is that related? I don't know, but I'm gonna keep looking.
yeah.
Now, you guys can decide if you think like the mafia's involved. I think so.
There's
And
enough little incidents that help lead to that for
Mhm.
sure.
and including like the prohibition stuff too. So like illegal selling of alcohol, all those parties, those public officials that are present, and then combined with the murder. So people, I guess, can decide.
Oh, I love it. Well, and then going back to the names too, they changed their names on
Yeah.
their own, but also people can't spell Italian names. They couldn't back then, they can't do it now. And so, it's hard to say.
Yeah, I part of my research was just misspelling things. It's so frustrating. Even looking at the original Frank, his documents, he clearly wrote his signature, and then the lady, I'm imagining it's a woman working in the office, she puts a J in there in a different color. I'm like, there's no J. This is like a little side note, but I made this census table from 1850 to 1930, and it's at the clerk recorder's office in Colusa County. I'm going to publish it one day, so online, but I haven't done that yet. So in here, I also put the misspellings of people's names. So this has all the Italians in Colusa in their census,
Oh,
but I put
cool.
the misspellings because if people are going to search their family history, I want them to know what are some of the spellings that the official documents will have.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you did that for future generations who want to research because I've researched and then I run across a different spelling and I research that and it's a whole nother treasure
Yeah.
of stuff that I found. It's crazy.
Oh, and also like when the computer reads the cursive, it doesn't always read it correctly. Like
Yes.
if you're on ancestry.com. So yeah,
You really have to
maybe
dot your I's and your T's and all your vowels at the end of the
yeah.
names and stuff. Oh my gosh, those were great stories.
Yeah, and I'm still finding out things every day. I feel like people are bringing me pieces to the puzzle. Like we just had a family reunion last weekend, and the whole time I was talking the whole time because everybody wanted to know more and share more. And I think at this point, I could probably write an updated version of my thesis because I have so much more. I could make it stronger.
Because people have been coming to you.
Mhm.
Everybody loves storytelling. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's in our blood.
Oh,
They
totally.
love to hear those stories. So, what do you hope that people do take away from your research?
I think I would like if people realize everything has a story. So even the most seemingly ordinary person or thing has a whole entire history. And I hope that they become inspired to look into their own history, but also into the town they grew up in or the town they're visiting, or just looking around them and thinking like, what is the story? Because there is one and it's not boring. It's never been boring. I think this small town ordinary. Like, of course, I don't believe they're ordinary. Like we talked about earlier, they're not.
No,
But like what people think is ordinary, yeah, I just challenge people to question that. What is ordinary? Like, does it exist? Because I haven't found it yet.
I
Yeah.
haven't either. And the smallest place can be just as rich with stories as our huge cities, our capitals, all of that.
And even sometimes I think a lot of stories get lost in cities. Like we tell the stories of big cities, but we're still telling the stories of the dominant.
Yes.
So in the small towns, we have people talk. We're able to save them a little bit differently. So I think small towns give us more opportunity, possibly, than bigger cities in different ways.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it does. I think a lot of the stories fall to the big players in the city,
Yeah,
and those everyday people, whether it's the peddler on the street or the baker or whatever, they get lost.
there's not much to do in a small town but tell stories. And at least in Colusa, that's like my favorite thing to do.
Favorite thing to do, yeah. So what's next for you? Are you planning? I mean, it sounds like you have a lot of projects in the works to share more history.
Yeah, I'm definitely not done at all. I think telling this story and just history in general is my calling in life. So I'd like to keep writing. So there's an author, his name is Eric Larson. One of his books was Devil in a White City, his
Oh,
writing style. Yeah, he's
Okay.
like it's nonfiction, but he writes like he's able to throw in some colorful pieces in there, like that I can't do as a historian. So I'd like to write a book telling this story, but in an embellished, not lying way, but in a more like a prettier way. And I could talk about like the weather and people's emotions, things that I would have to assume that I can't say as a historian. But so I'd like to write a book, make it more accessible, the history to people that don't necessarily want to read like history. Like I said earlier, it took me almost a year or more to get to prove to my school that this story was worth telling. And it's brought me so much. I've got to do so many things and I don't know I didn't think I was going to be on a podcast, and now I'm here today. So I'm not sure, but I'm definitely not done.
Good. Well, and it opened up doors for you too. I mean, you now have people coming and telling you stories that maybe if you didn't do this thesis, you would have never known about
Oh,
Colusa.
yeah.
Oh, I'd love it. Well, if you ever want to come back on and we could do it my traditional way of like where mom and I sit, and you want to tell a story of a Colusa Italian, I would love to have you back on to do that.
Nice.
So, yeah, this has been great. Is there a place that people can find your thesis and I can post any of that stuff in the show notes?
Yes, I have a couple things I want to say to people. If you just Google Little Italy Calusa, it should be the first thing that comes up,
Okay.
my thesis. Also, if people want to share something with me, if they're from Calusa or not, or surrounding areas, I'll tell you my email for that in a moment. But I want people to know that a lot of people have come to me saying like they know this tiny little thing that's insignificant, but really those little things that people think are insignificant can be the final piece to like this puzzle I'm trying to solve. So I don't want people to think, oh, what I have to say isn't worth anything because it is. Like it all
Yes.
matters to me and adds up. So my email is it's calusaitalians@gmail.com. So pretty easy.
Pretty easy. Perfect. Oh, I completely agree with you with those little tidbits. I mean, you never know where it's going to fit in or answer a question or connect something. So definitely email her.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Great. Well, I will post all of that in the show notes. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed our conversation. And like I said, you are welcome back anytime and we could tell a story of a Calusa Italian. I would love to do that.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.